Welcome back, everybody. Ready for another deep dive? This time, we're going to be tackling the incredible life of Harriet Tubman.
Yeah. It's such a powerful story, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, whether you're a history buff or just looking for a little inspiration, this is the deep dive for you. And you know what makes it even better?
What's that?
We're basing this whole deep dive on the book Life of Harriet Tubman. And guess what? The ebook's only $1.99.
Wow, seriously.
Yep, just like all the books we use for these deep dives.
That's amazing. Talk about a steal.
Right. So get ready to journey back in time. We're about to meet a woman who defied all odds.
Okay, so I know a little about Harriet Tubman, but I'm excited to, really dig in.
Yeah. So let's start with like the basics, right? I mean, most people know her as Harriet Tubman, but that wasn't the name she was given at birth, was it?
No, not at all. She was actually born Araminta Ross around 1822 in Maryland. And she was born into slavery, which, just trying to grasp that reality is really tough.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And this book, like, it doesn't sugarcoat anything. It really lays out the brutal reality of her childhood. I mean, you're talking forced labor, constant threat of family separation, and the physical abuse.
Right. And it's not even just the physical abuse, but the psychological trauma of it all. The way slavery tried to just completely dehumanize people.
Yeah, that's what gets me. But even as a young girl, Harriet showed this incredible spirit, this resistance. Like, she just refused to be broken.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. There's that story about the mistress she was hired out to and how she, purposely messed up her tasks. It was a form of protest, even as a child.
Wow, so she was fighting back from a young age.
It seems like it. She understood that the power of the slave owners wasn't absolute. Even back then, she was defying those expectations.
And her faith, right. It seems like that played such a huge role in her life and her strength.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like this passive kind of faith, was it?
No, it was active. It was defiant. She truly believed that God had chosen her for a purpose.
Mm-hmm. And those biblical stories of liberation, like the Exodus from Egypt, I can only imagine how much those must resonated with her.
Oh, absolutely. They gave her hope and a framework for her own struggle.
And then, of course, there's her own escape in 1849 when she was about 27. Think about that. The courage to leave everything behind, risk everything for a chance at freedom.
I mean, traveling over 90 miles on foot with the North Star as her guide,
Yeah.
it's almost unimaginable.
And she had to leave her family behind with the hope that she could come back for them later. I mean, that takes incredible strength.
It really does. She really was like a Moses figure leading her people to the promised land.
That's such a powerful image. And
Yeah.
that leads us to like the Underground Railroad. Now, I know it wasn't an actual railroad, right?
Right. It was more like the secret network with routes and safe houses all over the place.
It's like something out of a spy movie, isn't it?
Totally. With codes and signals, all to help people escape to freedom.
It's incredible to think about the risks people took to help others.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The bravery and selflessness involved is just, it's remarkable.
Yeah, and Harriet wasn't just about the physical escape either. She wanted to make sure people felt empowered, like they were truly free, not just running away.
Right. It was about psychological liberation, too.
I read this story where some of the people she was guiding got scared and wanted to turn back. And Harriet, she pulled out a gun.
She did.
Yep. She said something like, "You'll be free or die." I mean, talk about tough love. But in that situation,
Yeah, it makes sense. Going back meant certain danger.
exactly.
Yeah.
And then there's Harriet's role in the Civil War. She wasn't just a conductor on the Underground Railroad anymore. She became a spy, a scout, a nurse. Just incredible.
And then there's that Combahee River raid in 1863.
Oh, yeah.
She led this armed expedition, the first woman to do so in U.S. history, and they freed over 700 enslaved people.
Wow. Talk about a badass.
Seriously. But what's even more impressive is that her fight didn't end with the war. She kept going, advocating for women's suffrage, helping freedmen, even establishing a home for the aged.
Wow, so she was fighting for social justice on all fronts.
Absolutely. And she wasn't alone either. There were so many other incredible women fighting alongside her. Sojourner Truth, Lucretia Mott, Elizabeth Cady Stanton.
A real sisterhood of changemakers. It reminds me that social change never happens in isolation. It takes a community.
Yeah, exactly. And while the men often led the public face of the movements, these women were the backbone, working tirelessly behind the scenes.
It's amazing to think about the impact they had on shaping the world we live in today. But it's also important to remember the personal sacrifices they made.
Right, the toll it took on them, physically and emotionally.
Harriet especially, I mean, the constant fear, the separation from loved ones, the strain on her health.
It's a reminder that even the strongest among us are human, and their achievements are all the more impressive because of it.
Absolutely. So, shall we take a little break and then come back and dive even deeper?
Yeah, sounds good to me. So we're talking about the Underground Railroad, right? It's amazing how organized it was, like a secret society almost.
It really is. I mean, they had these intricate codes and signals. Remember we were talking about those quilts with the special patterns?
Yeah, it's like hiding in plain sight.
Exactly. And those songs, like, they weren't just spirituals. They had hidden messages in them.
Right, like directions and warnings disguised as music. So clever.
Okay, but hold on. How did this whole Underground Railroad even get started? Did somebody just wake up one day and say, let's build a secret network to help people escape slavery?
Well, it actually has roots in certain religious groups like the Quakers. They were really against slavery, believed in equality for all people, you know?
Right, so they were some of the first abolitionists.
Exactly. They thought, this is just wrong. We got to do something about it.
And they put their beliefs into action, huh?
They did. And other groups joined them too, like the Mennonites and the Methodists, all driven by their faith and a sense of justice.
So a real interfaith effort, huh?
Totally. And it started small, but eventually grew into this massive network spanning across states.
Wow. All these people working together, risking everything to help others escape to freedom.
Yeah, and think about those safe houses. People risk their own lives, hiding these escaping slaves in their homes.
I know. The courage it took to do something like that. The legal repercussions alone, let alone the potential for violence.
It's incredible. Remember Levi Coffin, the president of the Underground Railroad, they called him? His house in Indiana was a major stop on the route to Canada.
Oh, yeah, I read about that. He and his wife, Catherine, they helped thousands escape.
Thousands! And they even built secret rooms and passages in their house. Imagine that.
Talk about living a double life. They must have been constantly on edge.
Oh, for sure. But they knew the risk was worth it to save lives.
Right, fighting against slavery like that.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just white abolitionists, was it? Black communities were heavily involved, too.
Absolutely. Even though it put them at even greater risk. Providing safe houses, guidance, everything. They were such a crucial part of the whole operation.
It's amazing to think about everyone who contributed, you know? Their bravery should never be forgotten.
Agreed. Okay, so we've talked about Harriet and the Underground Railroad itself, but let's talk about some of the other amazing women who were part of this movement.
Yes. The sisterhood.
Yeah.
We mentioned Sojourner Truth earlier. What a powerful voice she had. Traveling around the country, speaking out against slavery, and advocating for women's rights.
Remember her famous "Ain't I a Woman" speech?
Yeah.
So powerful. It really highlighted how race and gender intersect in the fight for equality.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then you have Lucretia Mott, who was also Quaker abolitionist.
Oh, yeah. Her home in Philadelphia was a well-known stop on the Underground Railroad, too. She was such a tireless advocate for social justice.
And, of course, we can't forget Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony leading the charge for women's suffrage.
Exactly. They understood that achieving true equality meant addressing both racial and gender discrimination.
And all these women, they were working behind the scenes, organizing, strategizing, making real change happen.
While the men were often the public face of these movements,
Right.
It really highlights the importance of collective action.
I know. It's incredible to think about the impact they had, risking their reputations, their safety, to make the world a more just place.
They paved the way for future generations to continue the fight, but we also have to acknowledge the sacrifices they made, the personal toll it took.
Exactly. It wasn't all about victories and achievements. Harriet, especially, faced incredible hardship. The constant fear, the separation from loved ones, the strain on her health.
It's a reminder that they were human, you know? Despite their strength and resilience, they were still vulnerable.
And that makes their achievements even more impressive, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It humanizes them, makes their stories even more powerful and relatable.
So we've spent a lot of time talking about Harriet's incredible work on the Underground Railroad and during the Civil War. But her story, it doesn't end there, does it?
Oh, no, not at all. I mean, her dedication to helping others continued long after the war was over. She just never stopped fighting for justice, you know?
It's pretty amazing, especially considering all the personal challenges she faced and her health declining and everything. Didn't she settle in Auburn, New York? I think the book mentioned she'd bought land there years earlier.
Yeah, that's right. And that land became more than just a home for her. It was like a sanctuary for her aging parents and for so many others who needed help. People escaping slavery, folks struggling to get by.
So it was kind of like a continuation of her work on the Underground Railroad in a way, providing refuge and support.
Exactly. It shows how much empathy she had. She understood that freedom wasn't just about escaping slavery. It was about having the chance to build a new life, to thrive.
She also continued working with freedmen in the South, right? Like helping them set up schools and stuff. She didn't just want to get them out of slavery. She wanted to make sure they had the tools to succeed.
Absolutely. She knew that education was key. It was a way to break the cycle of poverty and oppression that slavery had created.
And of course, she never gave up on fighting for women's suffrage either.
Nope. She saw it all as connected, Racial justice, women's rights, they were all part of the same struggle.
It's mind-boggling to think about all the things she accomplished while also taking care of her family, running a home, and dealing with all sorts of challenges. She was such a powerhouse.
It really is incredible. And don't forget her faith, too. That was a huge part of her life, her strength that guided her through everything.
Right, like she always believed she was doing God's work.
Exactly. So as Harriet got older, she started reflecting on her life. And she talked about the visions she'd had, the spiritual experiences that had helped her along the way.
Wow. And did she have any regrets?
Well, she acknowledged the sacrifices she'd made, but she also expressed a lot of gratitude for the chance to have been a part of something so important. She knew she'd made a difference.
It's really humbling to think about, all the lives she touched, the impact she had. She wasn't just a conductor on the Underground Railroad. She was like a symbol of hope, a symbol of resistance.
And her legacy continues to inspire us today. Think about all the schools and statues in her honor and that push to get her on the $20 bill.
Right. It's amazing to think about how one person can make such a huge difference in the world.
And it's not just her individual accomplishments either. It's the values she embodied, Courage, compassion, that unwavering belief that things could be better. Those are values we can all learn from, even today.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I have a question for our listeners. What will your legacy be? What impact do you want to have on the world? Harriet's story shows us that one person can make a difference, even when things seem impossible. So if you're feeling inspired, if you want to learn more about Harriet Tubman, I highly recommend checking out Life of Harriet Tubman. It's a truly incredible book. And remember, the ebook is only $1.99, just like all the books featured in our deep dives.
Yeah, it's an amazing story. Thanks for joining us on this journey, everyone.